Winter Thunder. This is an historical war game depicting the Battle of the Bulge, designed by Brian Train and published by Tiny Battle. You can purchase a professionally printed copy from Tiny Battle, or you can do like I did, which is I download the files from Wargame Vault and then I made my own copy, print and play. Caveat, my print and play copies are always very utilitarian. I want to play the game. I'm sure yours will look a lot better because you will put more love and care in the production of your own print and play copies. It's a two-player game, but also perfectly playable by a solitaire player. That is how I played it. For reasons that you will see, I wonder if in fact this game doesn't play even better as a solitaire study of the Battle of the Bulge rather than a two-player game. And these days, I'm filming this in early March 2020, when social distancing is really becoming an important thing. Well, then having solitaire games or soloable games is all the most valuable. The game is based on the same system that you may know from Summer Lightning, the Invasion of Poland 1939, by the same designer, came out a couple of years ago, and I like that game. That in turn was based on a game called Autumn Mist, and which I haven't played, and as I understand it, Autumn Mist is to be the earlier version of Winter Thunder being the reworked version of Autumn Mist, but that's what I've read somewhere. I read it on the internet, so it must be true. Now, two-player game, one side will represent the Allies and the other side the Axis. As you can imagine, during... the map is falling apart. As you can imagine, usually I would put a piece of plexiglass on it, but the glare was ridiculous, so I'm trying to do without that. As you can imagine, the Axis forces will set up here, and they are in force, they are forceful, and a pitiful small number of Allied units, American units at the beginning, you get British reinforcements later, will try to slow them down, but just there aren't enough of them to do any significant dent, to put a dent in the German advance. So these early defenders will be slaughtered. There isn't much else there. Try to get them slaughtered slowly to slow the advance of the Germans, while American reinforcements and British reinforcements come in. And then, of course, you'll be able, hopefully, to create another line of defense. The terrain is very important, like in every game about the Bulge. Last week I played a game about Shiloh, and now all of a sudden I thought, wow, Battle of the Bulge is almost like the Shiloh World War II, because you also have a surprise attack from one side, a hastily put together defense from the other side, and a really challenging terrain full of rough terrain, as you can see here, and forest, these darker hexes here, and then also light woods. That means that most of the action will take place along the roads. You won't be able to do a lot of fancy stuff, which is also important. I was also surprised at the beginning the game doesn't have any zone of control, but it has supply lines, because you don't really need to project zones of control. If you're sitting on a road, then you may be able to block a large net of possible ways for your opponent to get supply, and that may cause considerable damage. The game is a chit pull game. That means that after each turn you have an initial phase in which you get reinforcements and a couple of other things like that, of upkeep things will happen. After that, the players will draw chits representing different headquarters, and then they will activate the corresponding headquarter on the map, and then that headquarter in turn will activate units within 5 tactical movement points from itself. So chit pull, you put the activation chits in a cup, and then start drawing randomly, and then you see what happens, who gets to activate and in what order. A turn is over when either all units and all headquarters on the map activated, which is unlikely, most likely when you decide you don't want to activate anybody anymore. Especially for the Germans, they have so many headquarters that probably you will not need to activate them all the entire time. Units, we have headquarters up there with a combat factor in parentheses, same as artillery because it is used in defense. And then here we have again combat factor, bottom left corner of a unit, and then movement factor bottom right. The NATO symbol, of course, tells you the type of unit that is. There may be a letter here. E means elite, and P, some units have that, means poor. Units don't have anything, they're just average. And so units will be there on the map, ta-la-la. I'm putting them down totally randomly, but that's good enough for now. And so when a headquarter activates, you will activate units within, as we said, 5 movement points from it. Units that are activated there will get to move and then resolve combat, then declare combat. You can also, before you do any of that, mark a unit for exploitation, in which case that means that the unit for now doesn't do anything, but will get to move and attack after the unit's not marked for exploitation, move and attack. Units that are out of range don't get to activate usually unless you draw an army chit, an army activation chit. Some of those are in the activation chit cup. When you draw the army chit, then you can activate all units that are out of range that couldn't be activated otherwise, and also you get to activate a normal headquarter. That's the general idea so far for activation. So activated units move and then they get to declare combat. And combat is interesting. I remember from Summer Lightning, combat was advertised as, and actually was, virtually diceless, meaning that in most cases you didn't really need to roll dice to know what happened. This I read somewhere, was on the internet, so it must be true, that Winter Thunder also is supposed to be like that, but I found myself rolling dice a lot more often. When you resolve combat, the 2 players must decide what kind of mission, which means what kind of approach they are going to take. Each player receives, depending on their role in that fight, a pool of chits. There are 4 possible chits representing 4 possible approaches for the attacker, and there are 5. Not one of the greatest mathematicians of our age. And there are 5, that means 6. I'm really not. 6 possible approaches for the defender. The 2 players will select the chits secretly, simultaneously, and then they will reveal them. Well, how do you do this when you play solitaire? Simple. You choose the chit of the attacker and then you randomly select that of the defender. If you really want to experience the grueling pain of Fog of War, then you can draw both chits randomly. Whatever the system that you use to decide which mission or approach is taken by the defender and by the attacker, you cross-reference and you look at the little grid that you find there. The things at the bottom tell you the left side, the left results apply to the attacker, the blue results on the right apply to the defender. A and R means that that side advances or retreats by that number of spaces. The numbers on top. If there is a number on top, including a 0, it means that that side must take casualty checks. Only when you see that little hyphen there, that doesn't apply. If the number is different from 0, then on top of taking the casualty check also has that modifier. So when you check for casualties, first you need to determine the casualty check total, which is a number that you obtain by first putting together the combat strength of all of the enemy units involved that are attacking you. You add the modifier that you may have from the combat matrix, from the mission matrix. You add or subtract the other possible modifiers from the player aid. You can pause and read if you so desire. That will give you a total number, again, the casualty check total. You roll a die. The game uses 10-sided dice. And if you roll equal to or less than that number, then the unit that is checking takes a step loss. The number of casualty checks that you take is equal to the number of full divisions of enemy full divisions that you are facing, with a minimum of 1 in case they're only reduced divisions that are attacking you. And that's how you take those step losses that, of course, will reduce your strength and then ultimately will possibly eliminate you from the game. There are a couple of other rules, I would say, but this is really the general idea. Each turn you activate your units by drawing activation chits and then activating units within command range of that quarter that was just selected. Those units activate, move, and attack. Units that were placed in exploitation then also get to move and attack. And you continue like this until the end of the game, and that the point victory is based on victory points that you score by controlling certain locations and or by eliminating enemy units. So, Winter Thunder Print and Play Edition. This is a good game, definitely enjoyable. I enjoyed playing it as a solitaire game, as a solitaire study of the battle. I don't know that I want to play it as in a two-player situation, unless I guess I can be the Axis and the poor sucker playing the other side is gonna be the allies. Because, well, and this is of course due to the structure that historically the battle developed. Well, we know that the first couple of turns the game is not gonna be all that exciting as you get slaughtered and the Germans are just steamrolling over you. And then, of course, the reinforcements arrive and the game becomes more interesting. Then you start, as the Allies pushing back, try maybe to take back some of those towns that they took control of. You try to threaten their supply lines. The effects of being out of supply is not terrible here, but still that will slow down the advance of the Germans because they get a penalty in attack when they're out of supplies. So there are definitely things that you can do as the ally player, but you had to wait for a while before that happens. And so if you're just playing the game solitaire by yourself, both sides to the best of your possibilities, then you do not have that. Then you see the drama unfold and both acts, both halves or both the main sections of the game will play out in an interesting and fun way. Then seeing the back and forth, the turn of the tide, actually that will create variety and more, precisely because of variety, then more interest as you play. So this is in general about how the game captures the theme, and I think it does very well, and also how that translates into opportunities and pluses and minuses in terms of gameplay. As for the system itself, I enjoyed it already back in the day from Summer Lightning, which I remember was described quite accurately as almost diceless game, because although technically you do have to roll for casualty checks every time that you have to take a casualty check, I remember that back in the day you were able almost over to get a casualty total that was higher than the die roll could give you, and so you simply apply those casualties automatically. Because there's no such a thing as if you roll a high number, automatic victory, low number, automatic defeat. The casualty number could be one that you cannot meet. But in practice, I didn't see that happen nearly as much here in Winter Thunder. I rolled almost every time that there was a casualty check. Some numbers higher, some numbers lower, but casualty checks were fairly easy to, again, we're reasonable. Probably due, if not mainly or a lot due to the nature of the terrain, because the forest that you have in so many key parts of the map, of course, gives a disadvantage when you're attacking and an advantage when you're defending, and that makes, therefore, the casualty checks not as tough because it is easier, thanks to the terrain, for the defender to be able to protect against that. And so the casualty checks were actual checks, and that added more randomness but also more unpredictability. It's a chit pool game, so you do not know exactly the order in which you will activate, although that is not that relevant the first couple of turns, in which you don't have much to do as the LA player, and you are gonna devastate the opponent as the German player. So kind of really, are you gonna slaughter them in the north or in the south, in the east or in the west first? It doesn't feel all that relevant. The chit pull mechanic becomes more integral to the design, more central, of course, later in the game, when again you have more units and more groups, and therefore more headquarters activating on the allied side. So you have all these elements that are part of the general system of mechanics that I think work pretty well, because they give you a situation which is tense, which is interesting. You have enough things to worry about that the game is interesting, but the game remains fairly easy, fairly intuitive. Yes, and other things here that are not very common, such as a war gamer, you may have a harder time figuring out than maybe an absolute beginner. Definitely a game that a beginner war gamer could play. I don't see anything there that would be impossible to absorb and to play and possibly to enjoy playing. Winter Thunder, I enjoyed this game. I think it captures the game rather well. It has a nice flow when you're playing solitaire. You see the tragedy, you see the action, there is variety in the action, the mechanics and the theme integrate very well. I do not know, again, that I want to play with another player, but as a solitaire study of the Battle of the Bulge, really fun.